Growing up, I always felt like an extra in my own family. My parents, Susan and Mark, made it clear that my younger sister Lily was the star of the show. To be fair, she's charismatic and talented, smart, pretty, good at sports, you name it. But what stung wasn't just how much they adored her. It was how little they seemed to notice me. The favoritism started early, though I didn't fully grasp it until I was older. I remember being 6 years old, watching Lily, who was barely 3, get a pony ride for her birthday. It was a whole backyard affair. Balloons, a cake shaped like a carousel, and dozens of kids running around with party favors. My birthdays? The most memorable one was when I got a used board game with a missing piece. Last Christmas was the ultimate slap in the face. My parents got Lily a brand new car. It wasn't a modest one, either. It was a shiny, red convertible, complete with a big, ridiculous bow on top. Meanwhile, I got a set of cups. Not a fancy glass set or anything. Just a pack of mismatched mugs with "World's Best Brother" printed on one, almost mockingly. It's not like I expected them to drop the same amount of money on me, but the difference was painful. Watching Lily beam and hug my parents while I sat there, pretending to admire my mugs, was humiliating. And it wasn't about the material stuff either. It was the message behind it. I wasn't worth celebrating. Lily, to her credit, didn't lord it over me. But that almost made it worse. She'd act surprised, even uncomfortable sometimes, at how much she got. She'd always offer to share, but it felt condescending, like throwing scraps to a stray dog. I tried to talk to my parents about it once, during my senior year of high school. I asked why Lily always seemed to get more attention, more praise, more everything. My mom laughed nervously and said, "Oh, don't be silly, Jacob. We love you both equally." My dad chimed in, saying, "You're just quieter. Lily needs more support because she's out there taking on the world." That was the excuse every time. Lily needed more. She needed encouragement. She needed better tools for her bright future. And I apparently needed nothing. My resentment simmered quietly for years. I never blew up about it, but it colored every interaction. Even now, as an adult, the memories still sting. It's not that I hate Lily. I don't think I ever could. But I can't help but feel bitterness when I think about all the times I faded into the background while she took center stage. When I turned 28, I decided I'd had enough. I was tired of being the shadow in my own family, the afterthought at every holiday, and the obligatory "Oh, Jacob, you're here too" at gatherings. By then, Lily was 20, thriving in college, and basking in our parents' endless praise. The 8-year gap between us might as well have been a canyon, and we had almost nothing in common. It wasn't animosity, it was indifference, built brick by brick over years of imbalance. The decision to leave wasn't sudden. It crept up on me after countless dinners where I sat at the edge of conversations, ignored except for the occasional "pass the salt." I wanted more for myself, so I packed up and moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. At first, the silence was deafening. No more family dinners. No more Lily's laughter echoing through the house. No more sitting on the sidelines. But that silence became comforting. It was mine. I threw myself into my work. Interior design had always been a passion of mine, even if my parents dismissed it as a hobby compared to Lily's pre-law ambitions. Starting out wasn't easy. I took on tiny projects, redesigning cramped apartments or giving cheap Airbnbs a facelift. But I loved it. With each project, I gained confidence and clients started spreading the word. Eventually, I opened my own design studio. It was small, just me and a handful of freelance collaborators, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt like I was building something worthwhile, something that wasn't overshadowed by someone else's achievements. Around that time, I met Emily. She hired me to revamp her tiny cafe, a warm, inviting space with terrible furniture and clashing colors. We hit it off immediately, talking late into the night about design, life, and everything in between. She had this way of making me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. Emily became my partner in every sense of the word. She had a sharp eye for style and a natural flair for business, and before I knew it, she wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my business partner too. We expanded the studio together, landing bigger clients and building a reputation for fresh, functional designs. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was thriving. I had carved out a space for myself, away from my family's suffocating dynamics. I thought I had left all that behind, or at least I wanted to believe I had. When Emily and I bought the house, it felt like the culmination of everything we'd worked for. It was a sprawling, beautiful home in the suburbs, the kind of place we had dreamed about during those late nights planning our future. The price tag was eye-watering, $1.5 million, but we had built a successful business together, and we were ready to take that step. Every corner of the house was full of possibility. It wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of how far we'd come. We spent months working on it, redesigning the spaces to fit our vision. Emily focused on the kitchen, crafting her dream layout, while I threw myself into creating a sleek, modern office. Felt perfect until my family got wind of it. Started subtly with my mom dropping hints. She'd say things like, "Oh, Jacob, it's so wonderful you can afford a place like that. You know, Lily's apartment is getting cramped with the baby on the way." First, I brushed it off, but then the comments became more pointed. My dad chimed in during a family dinner. "Jacob, don't you think it'd make sense for Lily to move into the house? She's starting a family, and they need the space more than you and Emily do. You two don't even have kids yet." I laughed, thinking they couldn't possibly be serious. But they were. My parents had somehow decided that our hard-earned home should go to Lily because, in their eyes, her needs trumped ours. Emily was furious. "This is our house," she said, pacing the living room. "We bought it. We paid for it. How could they think it's even an option to give it away?" Things escalated quickly. My parents began calling me relentlessly, pushing the narrative that Lily deserved the house more than we did. They argued that family should come first and accused me of being selfish for refusing to help. Lily, to her credit, didn't outright demand the house, but she didn't discourage them either. She'd say things like, "I'm not asking for anything, but it would make things easier for us. You don't need all that space." I stood my ground, but my parents weren't about to let it go. One morning, I woke up to find a legal notice taped to my door. My parents had filed a claim, alleging that they had a moral stake in the property and demanding it be transferred to Lily. Emily and I were stunned. I couldn't believe my own family was taking me to court over my home. We hired a lawyer and began gathering every piece of documentation we had: purchase agreements, proof of payments, business earnings, everything to prove the house was legally ours. The court battle was messy. My parents painted me as ungrateful and cold-hearted, someone who'd rather see his sister struggle than share his success. It hurt, but I refused to back down. Our lawyer laid out the facts clearly, and in the end, the judge ruled in our favor. The house was ours, legally and unequivocally. I thought winning would feel good, but it didn't. My relationship with my parents was shattered, and Lily stopped speaking to me altogether. Emily tried to comfort me, saying we'd done the right thing, but the whole ordeal left a sour taste in my mouth. The house, once a dream project, became a reminder of how far my family was willing to go to take something that wasn't theirs. I had fought for it and won, but at what cost? The day of the verdict, I sat in the courtroom with Emily beside me, clutching my hand so tightly I thought she might cut off circulation. The past few months had been an exhausting whirlwind of depositions, hearings, and nights spent agonizing over the possibility of losing our home. I was angry, hurt, and drained, but mostly I just wanted it all to be over. When the judge announced the decision, I barely registered the words at first. The property is legally owned by Jacob Anderson and Emily Harper. The plaintiff's claims lack merit and are dismissed with prejudice. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. We'd won. The house was ours, and there was nothing my parents or anyone else could do to take it away. But the surprises didn't end there. The judge went on to address the emotional toll the case had taken on me. She called out the blatant manipulation, the baseless accusations, and the psychological strain caused by my family's actions. In a decision I hadn't even thought possible, she ordered my father to pay $250,000 in damages for emotional and psychological harm. I was stunned. The courtroom fell silent for a moment, and then I heard Emily exhale sharply beside me. My father's face turned ashen, and my mother's jaw dropped. They looked at me like I was the villain in some story they'd concocted, but I didn't care anymore. When we stepped outside, Emily hugged me tightly, whispering, "It's finally over." I wanted to feel triumphant, to bask in the justice of it all, but instead, I just felt hollow. My parents had dragged me through hell, and even with the court on my side, it didn't undo the damage. The $250,000 was significant, life-changing even, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. My parents had shown their true colors, and now they were paying the price literally and figuratively. Back at home, Emily and I sat in our beautifully renovated kitchen, sipping wine and letting the reality of the victory sink in. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" I asked quietly. Emily set down her glass and looked at me with a mix of sadness and determination. "They should be asking if you'll forgive them." She was right, of course. Winning the court battle meant I could finally put the ordeal behind me, but it also meant fully acknowledging that my relationship with my parents might never recover. For now, though, I was content knowing our house was truly ours, a symbol of everything we'd built together. No one could take that away from us. I thought the court case had been the worst of it, but I was wrong. My relationship with Lily, which had already been strained, turned into something darker, something I never thought possible. After the verdict, she completely cut me off. First, I was relieved. I didn't need the constant tension or guilt trips. But then she started popping up in unexpected ways. A snide comment through mutual acquaintances. Passive-aggressive posts on social media that weren't subtle about who they were aimed at. It was petty, but I ignored it, hoping she'd eventually move on. She didn't. Lily's life was falling apart, and she made it clear that she blamed me for all of it. Her engagement ended not long after the trial, and her financial troubles spiraled. She moved back in with our parents, who, despite everything, continued to coddle her. They told anyone who'd listen that I had ruined her future by selfishly holding onto the house. The breaking point came one evening when I was leaving the studio after a late-night project. I was locking up when I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn around, something heavy struck the back of my head. I staggered, pain radiating through my skull, and managed to spin around just in time to see Lily standing there, an iron pipe clutched in her hands. Her face was twisted in rage as she screamed at me, accusing me of stealing her life, her happiness, everything. She swung the pipe again, catching my arm as I raised it to block the blow. The crack of bone was unmistakable. I don't remember much after that. A bystander must have called 911 because the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, my head bandaged and my arm in a cast. The doctors told me I had a fractured skull and multiple broken bones. Could have died. Lily was arrested that same night. She didn't deny what she'd done. She couldn't, with witnesses and security cameras catching the whole thing. In court, her defense was a pitiful mix of blame-shifting and sob stories about how I'd taken everything from her. The judge wasn't buying it. Lily was sentenced to 7 years in prison for aggravated assault. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to her justify attacking me, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Anger, sadness, disbelief. This was my sister, someone I'd grown up with, who had once been my closest family. And now she was a stranger, someone capable of violence and consumed by bitterness. Emily was a rock through all of it. She stayed by my side during my recovery, helping me through the physical pain and the emotional toll. "You don't owe her anything," she reminded me constantly. And she was right. Even so, there are days when I can't help but wonder how things got this bad. How did a family fight over a house turn into this? As much as I want to move on, there's a part of me that knows the scars Lily left, both physical and emotional, will never fully fade. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life threw another curveball. I had been through enough with my family, losing any semblance of a normal relationship, the court battle over the house, and Lily's violent attack, but nothing prepared me for what they did next. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when Emily didn't come home. She was supposed to grab some groceries after work and then meet me at the house. At first, I thought she was just running late, maybe caught in traffic. I texted her, but there was no response. I called and it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her. As the hours ticked by, my worry turned into full-blown panic. By the time the clock hit midnight, I was pacing the living room, calling her friends, colleagues, anyone who might know where she was. No one had seen her. The police got involved the next morning. They took my statement and started tracking her last known location using her phone records and credit card activity. It wasn't long before they uncovered something chilling. Emily's last purchase, a coffee, had been just a block away from her parents' house. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think my own parents could be involved, but deep down I knew. They had always resented Emily, blaming her for changing me and taking me away from the family. 2 agonizing days later, the police found her. She was being held at a dingy motel about 20 miles from our home. My parents had rented the room under fake names, claiming they wanted to save her from me. They had fed her some twisted story about how I was dangerous, how I'd hurt Lily and destroyed the family. When she refused to cooperate, they locked her in the room, taking her phone and any way of reaching out. When the police burst in, Emily was shaken but unharmed. Seeing her step out of that room, tears streaming down her face, was both the greatest relief and the deepest pain I'd ever felt. She clung to me like her life depended on it, and honestly, I think mine did too. My parents were arrested on the spot for kidnapping and false imprisonment. They tried to justify their actions, saying they were just trying to help her, to show her the truth about me. The police weren't buying it, and neither was the judge. Emily and I spent weeks recovering from the ordeal. She started seeing a therapist, trying to process the trauma of being abducted by people who should have been nothing but supportive. I struggled too, wrestling with the realization that my own parents had crossed a line I never thought possible. That event was the final nail in the coffin for my relationship with them. There was no coming back from this. I knew it, Emily knew it, and deep down I think they knew it too. They had lost me, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Through it all, Emily remained my anchor. Despite everything, she told me she didn't regret being with me, that we'd get through it together. And for the first time in a long while, I started to believe that maybe we could. After everything my family put us through, cutting them off completely wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. It wasn't easy even after all they'd done. A part of me still clung to the hope that they could change, that they'd see the damage they caused and try to make amends. But that hope was like a dying ember, flickering out with every new betrayal. The decision came after one last attempt from my mom. She sent a letter. Not an apology, but a plea, dripping with manipulation. She wrote about how family is forever, and how they missed me. But not once did she acknowledge what they'd done or how deeply they'd hurt us. I ripped the letter in half and tossed it in the trash. From that moment on, they became strangers. I blocked their numbers, deleted their emails, and told mutual acquaintances to stop bringing them up. It felt like a weight lifting off my chest, like I could finally breathe without their presence suffocating me. Emily was my rock through all of it. After everything she endured, being kidnapped by my parents, the relentless emotional strain, she still stood by me, stronger than ever. We both knew we couldn't move forward until we started taking care of ourselves, so that became our focus. I spent months in physical therapy, healing from the injuries Lily caused. The fractured skull and broken arm were slow to mend, but the psychological scars were even harder. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, helping me unpack years of resentment, pain, and guilt. Emily started going too, working through her own trauma. We found solace in each other, in the quiet moments we shared away from the chaos. Sitting on the porch of our dream home, sipping coffee as the sun set, we began to dream again. Not of what we'd lost, but of what we could build together. One night, as we lay in bed, Emily turned to me, her eyes soft but serious. "What do you think about starting a family?" The question caught me off guard, but in the best way. For so long, the idea of family had been tainted by my own experiences. But with Emily, it felt different, felt possible. "I think I'd like that," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And just like that, we started planning for a future that was ours and ours alone. We wanted to create the kind of family I never had, one built on love, respect, and trust. It wouldn't erase the pain of the past, but it was a way to move forward, to heal. Cutting ties with my family was painful, but it was the only way to reclaim my life. And with Emily by my side, I finally felt like I was living for myself. Not for their approval, not for their acceptance, but for the future we were building together.